Hey everyone, welcome to the RC Groups live hangout on YouTube, as well as the RC Groups podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, Hobby King at hobbyking.com. And today we have a very special hangout/podcast. Usually we talk about the current events and planes and anything that has crossed our radar in the RC world. And being at the helm of RC Groups, there's a lot that usually crosses our radar. But we thought it was important this week to go over something that is important to everyone that likes to fly anything radio controlled in the air. And that is Section 336. If you've been on RC Groups or get our mass emails, you'll know that I have been pushing out the information from the AMA on 336, how you can support it, what you need to do, and why you need to do it. But I have found that as I've done that, many people have said, why do I need to click this? Is this just for people that fly quadcopters? I thought this was for only drone pilots. And it happened so many times that I thought, it's time that we did a video and answered those questions directly and spoke to the question, why do I need to click these links in support of 336? I want to thank Jason Cole from RC Groups joining us again today. Jason, what's up?
What's up, everybody? Yeah, I'm excited because there's a lot I don't know myself, so this is going to be a fun time. And if you guys out there live viewing, if you got questions, go ahead and post those. We'll get them asked as well, and looking forward to it.
And we also have Mr. Chad Budreau, the Director of Public Relations and Government Affairs at the AMA. What's happening, Chad?
Hey, thanks for bringing me along. Glad to help.
So Chad's already done a great informational video that we did an article on, and I have it pulled up over here in case I need some info myself. But once again, there were questions in the live chat last week. So we really are looking for live chat interaction. We want to, any question you might have, be sure to bring it up. And I thought we would kick it off, Chad, by you once again going over 336, what it is, and then how it's being threatened, and then finally what all of us as modelers and ambassadors of the hobby can do.
Sure. So that's a lot to unpack. Let's start maybe with just the history of 336. Why is it even there? In 2008, 2010, actually before 2010, 2008, 2009, we recognized the FAA was going to start regulating model aircraft and this new emerging technology, drones. And we're in the FAA's airspace. So we went to the FAA and started collaborating with them on what these new rules could look like. And there's a lot of good people at the FAA, but just the way the federal government's set up, they're not nimble enough to really get into some of these niche disciplines. So we went to Congress in 2010, 2011, 2012. It was a multi-step process, and we created the special rule for model aircraft. And essentially what it says is, let's allow community-based organizations. Let's create this private-public partnership. We realize the FAA is not going to be nimble to address new technology like FPV, which was coming onto the scene. They would have to go through rulemaking, which could take many, many years. They're not going to get into disciplines like the sailplane or whether or not every aircraft needs to be certified if someone's working in their garage and working on a model. Let's allow a community-based organization to manage that. And that doesn't mean we're independent of the FAA. We're still in their airspace, but it allows us to work with those hobbyists and make sure that they're safe in the airspace. So that's why 336 is important. It allows community-based organizations like AMA to make sure those who are operating are doing it safely and responsibly, and they're held accountable as well.
Right.
So why is it under threat? And sometimes we kind of scratch our head on that. It's a little frustrating because AMA, for example, as a CBO, we have 82 years of safety in the airspace. Obviously, we've been sharing the airspace with the manned community and with others. We've been flying responsibly. It's a model that works, but there's some concerns from people. Unfortunately, 336 is being used as a get out of jail free card. So, one response is, let's just get rid of 336. AMA saying, no, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Sure, it needs refined, but let's work towards refining it. It's a model that works. And that's really where the divide is. There's an argument saying, let's just throw all the rules out and let's start over with 336. We're saying we never even gave 336 a chance.
Okay. And then so I guess what I would want to know is, what would the consequence be if that side that wants to throw it out wins? What happens?
Let me jump in here. Chad, my stance is 336 is our foot in the door is RC hobbyists. And if that foot is removed, we have no guarantee that we'll ever have anything to replace it, or how long it will take, or what will come in its place. That's my theory.
And you're right. The commercial industry, obviously, they're chomping at the bit. Even the Today Show this morning talked about drone package delivery. The commercial industry wants to do that, and they've been wanting to do that for years. But the federal government is not nimble. They may have the best intent, but as you mentioned, Jim, these processes take a long time. And without 336, we would have to start all over, take everything essentially, possibly through rulemaking or create waivers and exemptions. And we need it to keep the hobby moving forward.
Right.
And so our goal at this point in the game is to get everyone who flies RC to click these links and just sound the alarm that we are in support of 336, and we'll be very upset if it's gone.
Right. Without 336, there's really only one other path to fly recreationally, and that's Part 107, which is a great path. But 107 would require everyone to take a remote pilot test, which is fine. You have to take a 60-question test. You have to pay the fee. If you want to do niche operations like sailplane, or if you want to come to the Nats and compete, if you want to do FPV, you would have to go to the FAA, not only earn your 107 license, but then you'd have to apply for waivers, or you'd have to get exemptions. And some of these exemptions could take months just to do one sailplane flight recreationally. So 336 is an alternative to that path. And the great thing about the amendment, the Sanford-Davis amendment that's out there right now, is it also creates almost a third path. So as a hobbyist, you could fly under 107, take the full test, go through all those options. You could fly under a community-based organization. But let's say you don't want to do either one. There's now a third option that we're trying to push through that says you don't have to be fully into the CBO community. You don't have to be fully in the 107. But let's create let's call it a 107 Lite. And you don't have to take the full test, but maybe you have to go online and do a tutorial. And maybe you have a few extra restrictions. Maybe you can't, maybe you can't apply for all the waivers. If you want to do more niche flights, you need to get under the CBO or the 107 path. But I think it's a good path. Well, I know it's a good path. It helps address the pilots out there that really aren't flying under any set of rules. It gives them a clear path to follow.
I can tell you this, that any kind of change in the way we fly, like everyone having to do the 107, is going to affect the hobby in a gigantic way. When they said that we had to register, and we did, I can tell you as a guy who sits here and talks to RC companies and watches the numbers of people that sign up to the site every day and people that are using the site, things like that really make a huge cut in the industry and the hobby as a whole. So anyway, anything we can do to bypass something like that is going to keep our hobby growing the way it has been since last spring.
Exactly. And that's why 336 is so important, because without it, the FAA, let me paint a picture here. The FAA tends to kind of do a one-size-fits-all approach. And what does that mean? The commercial industry, for example, wants to do drone package delivery. Amazon wants to do it. You name it. Google's looking at doing it. We just saw a company on the Today Show talking about doing that. The FAA has two options. They can go through the full rulemaking process and carve out how they could do that. But the way the FAA is wired, they're going to make all those operators comply under Part 135. And what does that mean? Basically, it means those aircraft have to follow commercial standards. And those standards are pretty stringent. For example, every aircraft has to have supplemental oxygen, and they have to meet a long list of criteria. I share that because this industry is moving so quickly, and there's so many niche operations. You can't put UAS, whether it's drones or model aircraft, in a one-size-fits-all box.
Exactly. And I can tell you that RCGroups users have one theory on this. Blind Giants users have a completely different, I can't speak for every one of them, but on FG, these are giant scale guys flying $8,000 airplanes, and their feeling is that they have nothing to do with the drone / FPV pilot.
Right.
And how can the AMA separate that out, or how can the FAA?
Yeah, you're right. And that's the problem. The FAA would at this point, everything's a UAS. Everything's an aircraft.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a step further. Everything's an aircraft. We're saying that's far too broad. You can't create a one-size-fits-all approach to regulating UAS. Large model aircraft are completely different than a DJI Spark, which is completely different than a sailplane, which is completely different than a pylon racer. They all need to be treated differently. And the FAA just, they have the best intent, but they're understaffed and they're under-resourced really to manage this. And they may get there at some point, but they're not there yet.
Well, what do we do in that circumstance? Because we have a new regime since the last time the hobby was shaken up. And I'm not sure that is good or bad. I don't know that anything's really changed, and certainly nothing's going to change quickly. So I guess this is where we're on 336, and that the goal here is just to maintain status quo and not let anything slip away from us.
Well, no, I would say we acknowledge that there are some issues with 336 that need repaired, and we need to address some issues. Some people are treating 336 as a get out of jail free card. I can go fly and not have to be trained by anyone or held accountable to anybody. No, 336 is very clear. If you're doing something irresponsible, the community-based organization has a chance to step in, but even the FAA. And we're trying to tighten that up to say 336 is not a get out of jail free card. But with that doesn't mean we just throw it out the window. We give up on 336. Let's continue to build on it and refine it.
Right.
And what kind of relationships are we running between the AMA and the FAA now? Do we have FAA RC pilots? I know when I was at CEF, I guess a year ago, I ran into the FAA, and that guy was just there to see the show. He had no reason to be there on a government matter. And so I would think the more RC pilots we have in the FAA, the better it is for us.
Well, that's the interesting thing. With this Sanford-Davis Amendment, we had a lot of support from the unmanned and manned community, because even the FAA would acknowledge that the hobby is the cradle of aviation.
Right.
Whether it's Neil Armstrong or Burt Rutan, or even the current pilots for Delta and American and Southwest, many people from the FAA were AMA members, or they still are members, or they still participate in the hobby. So you're right. There's a lot of crossover there, and there's a lot of interest. And that's another reason we got to keep the hobby going, and why I think the man community and even the FAA is interested in keeping the hobby going, because there's already a pilot shortage. Let's not stifle that. Let's keep that alive.
It definitely is a breeding ground, and that's not the right term, but it's a gateway to full scale, not only flying, but design, and people that go to the moon all start with their RC aircraft. So it would be great if the FAA could latch onto that and see that as a training program for full scale pilots.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And we're now seeing some national security concerns being brought up. I think the FAA gets it. They get the importance of the hobby, and they want to see it continue to thrive. And I think many in the FAA would say, hey, 336 has a place. But now we're starting to see some other players get involved. We're seeing the commercial industry get involved. We're seeing the Department of Defense get involved. And they're starting to raise some concerns that, hey, maybe it needs tightened up. Maybe it needs refined. And that's our take at this point is, sure, let's work together and let's collaborate and let's refine it. If there are perceived problems, let's fix those. But if we were to simply repeal 336 or put everyone under the FAA, that would be problematic in the sense that the FAA just isn't capable yet of handling our discipline.
Right. Even if they passed something, they wouldn't be able to enforce it. But it would still be a mental barrier to people who might be in the hobby, might just have entered the hobby, or might be thinking about getting into the hobby.
Right.
And we travel across the country. I had an 87-year-old woman who had nothing to do with radio control, who just happened to be in the lobby. And she overheard us talking, and she started talking about the FAA and FPV. And I could not believe this woman, just from watching TV, had this information. And if she has it, then a lot of people in the general public have it. And so that's why we, as RC pilots, need to be the ambassadors and get out there and click the links and do all the proper things we need to do to keep our hobby alive.
Right. Without 336, the only other option at this point is a full 107 path. and that's going to just stifle, if not kill the hobby.
That's ridiculous. I mean, I think the majority, at least of the people that we talk to in RC groups, are the traditional hobbyists that are flying at mostly AMA, sanctioned flying fields, and it has nothing to do with commercial air, any of that airspace, any of those issues that anybody has a problem with. We're out in the middle of fields over nothing, having fun with airplanes, and nobody wants to be more regulated for doing that. That's something we've enjoyed for many, many years, decades.
1928, I think.
Yeah, it's ridiculous to have to go take a test to be certified and registered and all these waivers and stuff to be able to do that thing that we've been doing for so long. So it's very important to protect that you guys are working towards. But then I do know that we have to regulate all these guys, and it's mainly the angst comes from the drone crowd. These guys that are not hobbyists, they're first-time buyers. They get a drone, they go out and fly it over city streets and public places and cause problems. Those are what need to be regulated, but there's difficulty in, I guess, how you separate the two. But
well, and that's where the Sanford Davis Amendment, I think, strikes a good balance. And even that amendment needs refined, but it addresses that community you just brought up. What about, someone who went to a box store and bought a drone? They need some clear rules. And right now it's still kind of the Wild West. And that person somehow needs some sort of education and some sort of accountability.
If we have any live viewers with questions, I see some comments coming up. I see the STEM question. One thing I wanted to say, Chad, is I know people sometimes complain about this. It's not a reality at this time, but I would think that if you're flying at an AMA sanctioned field with officers, and I know this doesn't exist, but wouldn't that be a really viable way to provide clearance for RC pilots, make the FAA happy in some way if we're flying there?
That's been brought up quite a few times in Congress. And to be candid, we push back. That's not how we want to see the future of the hobby. You should not be isolated just to a flying site. Yeah, that's a great safe place. It's been vetted, and normally there's communication with the airport and you have a safety officer. It's a perfect place, but I fly in my own backyard sometimes.
Right.
Other people fly in their backyard, and if it's a safe place, you should be able to enjoy the hobby. And so we're not a big fan of isolating us to just flying sites.
Gotcha.
It's true. Yeah, it's good to hear.
Jason, do we have anything live coming through that we should address?
Well, Scott, the only other real question was he was asking if we'd all be forced to get 107, and I think we've covered that. If it goes away, that's the only other path to fly legally. Now, I know, like, when the registration happened, how, a lot of us industry people did it, a lot of people did it, but a lot of people didn't do it and still flew with no repercussions, no enforcement arm. Nothing happened, and they just still enjoyed the hobby. So there might be, if this gets repealed and you have to get a 107, a lot of people aren't going to do that and just fly anyway. We can't recommend that. It's not legal, but that's going to happen. It's just reality.
And that brings up a good point. This requires enforcement. We can write 50,000 different laws and we can continue to refine it, but until we have enforcement and accountability, this work is all for naught.
Yeah.
And we're getting input from the users here that they fly on private land, and some clubs may not approve drones. I always forget that Jason and I are lucky that we fly at a great club with really nice guys that fly any and everything. So sometimes I forget it's not like that for everyone across the country.
Right. And I think we're seeing a shift with clubs, but, and some of it's logistics. They may not be set up to accommodate helicopters or drones or, a different type of aircraft. But you're right. That's another reason we want, when you're flying drones, if you want to fly it in your backyard to take a family photo, you should be able to do that. You should be able to enjoy modeling in your backyard as well.
Yeah.
The one thing about the 107, when we had our little $5 licenses, is that the paranoia that came from that was pretty amazing. Every time we would fly at the field and a park ranger would show up, immediately people were looking for their batteries and their numbers, you know. And of course, I don't think it ever happened, Jason, where anybody was actually checking anything. They just wanted to see what we were flying.
Yeah, no, yeah, never saw any of that. But so what do we know we've got the link. We did the article on that. We've put that out there. So that's what we're asking people to do. Do we have a deadline we need to have all this done by?
Well, you know, it's funny you bring that up. As we speak right now, they're voting on the amendment. So we're going to be closing it here probably as we speak. As I walked in, I was listening to people in the House talk about 336. And we have staff at Capitol Hill right now actually listening. So they're sending me texts about who said what and what they just said. So I anticipate that we're going to be closing it here pretty soon because it will go to a vote. What I'm hearing is most likely, and I believe it may have already happened, they're going to pass the Sanford-Davis amendment, but they're also going to pass all the other amendments. From what I'm understanding, again, this is coming in as we talk, is that they're just going to take all the amendments and pass it in one fell swoop and then send it off to the conference committee. Or, you know, obviously the Senate will take a look at it and maybe pull some language from that as they shape their bill. So this is a multi-step process, and this won't be the last time we ask members to step in and write their legislators.
Yeah.
Well, if you haven't done it, do so. You can go to rcgroups.com and click on our magazine channel. Let me find a direct link. We're looking at it right here behind my back. It's in Electric Plain Talk, but if you go to magazines and click all, you'll scroll down a little bit and find this Protect the Hobby Right Congress Now. Also, Chad, I want to say a big thank you. I don't think anyone out there knows this yet, but the AMA is now the official event sponsor of Joe Nall 2018 for RC Groups and FlyingGiants.com. And Dave Mathewson, who I've known since before he was the president. Dave was actually a 3D pilot back in the day, and I approached him at Toledo back when 3D was the threat to the hobby, you know, and that seems laughable at this point in the game. But he and I spoke, and we've been friends ever since. And so he contacted me and said, Jim, let's do something. And so let's go to that. Of course, we'll be providing great coverage of Joe Nall. The AMA is always there. Tell us, is anything going to be talked about at that big AMA meeting this year?
Oh, yes, I'm going to Joe Nall as well. It's a great event. I love that event. And we will Thursday night, I believe it's the 19th, we'll have our membership meeting. Of course, many of the staff will be there. I'm arriving Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'll be there Friday for the dinner as well. But Thursday, if you're at Joe Nall, go to the member meeting. We provide free food, and by that point, the House will probably be put to bed, and we'll be working very hard towards the Senate. So it's almost a repeat. We go through the House, we're wrapping up the House, and we're going to go through the Senate. So we'll be right in the throes of working with the Senate at that point.
Awesome. Well, Jason, do you have any final questions or statements you'd like to make?
No, I wish the best for the hobby, you know, so I hope this all goes the way we want it to go, and, you know, we get to continue doing what we love.
Chad, any final thoughts or things you want to put out there?
Sure. You know, I can't stress enough how important 336 is for the hobby. You know, we have a great safety record operating under community-based organization. And that doesn't mean there can't be other community-based organizations, but it's a great private-public partnership. You know, the government they do a lot of great things, but when it comes down to our niche operations, whether it's an FPV race or sailplanes or anything in between, they're just not nimble enough to handle that. So we need to keep 336 so we can keep those operations going and be managed by the community.
So to answer that user that said, isn't this for drone pilots? The answer is no, this is for all pilots, anyone flying an RC craft from small to giant scale.
That's exactly right. Without 336, you would have to not only would you have to take your 107 test, but if you're flying a sailplane, you would have to get a waiver or authorization to fly over 400 feet. If you want to fly at night at IRCHA, if you want, there's so many use cases where the FAA just wouldn't be able to process those waiver requests, and essentially we could be grounded from a lot of those operations.
which would be terrible. And that's why we're here. I thought it was super important to get on this and get a direct answer to many of the questions that have come across on the forums, on all the forums. And that is your answer. So what I'm going to do is put a link to our Right Congress Now thread in the subject line of this video. So it'll be very simple for you to click on that and go and let everyone know that 336 is important. I want to thank Jason for joining us. Chad, I kind of got you on the last minute yesterday, so I appreciate you coming on today.
Glad to help. And any way we can help, you guys do a great job. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And we'll be looking for you at Joe Nall as we're getting ready to head on down there. And once again, thank you for being our event coverage sponsor at Joe Nall. And everyone, we're going to cut it short here. So this becomes a pure AMA 336 topic/video. And you can look for this and possibly other stories. All right, y'all. Thank you very much and have a great weekend.
Ooh, later.